begin, this episode is commentary and analysis, not a claim that every member of Congress is corrupt or that past was perfect. But millions of Americans across political lines feel something has changed. And the question today isn't whether Washington has problems. The question is, has Congress become so consumed by power, image, and permanent campaigning that it forgot how to govern? This is the Unfiltered Political Lens, and tonight we're pulling back the curtain. There was a time in America when people criticized Congress but still believed it could function. Not perfectly, not honestly all the time, not without scandal, but there remained a sense that government existed to govern. Today, many Americans look at Washington and ask questions that would have sounded unthinkable decades ago. Did Congress stop representing people and start representing itself? That question sits at the center of modern political frustration. Go back to 1990s, People argued, they protested, and they distrusted politicians. But despite all that, there was still an expectation that elected officials would eventually enter a room, negotiate, vote, and leave with something accomplished. The politics felt rough, and today, too many Americans, it feels endless. Congress in the 1990s existed in a world before algorithm-driven outrage, before viral clips, before social media transformed every public figure into a permanent content creator, before every hearing became entertainment, before every speech became a campaign ad, before every conflict became a fundraising opportunity. Members of Congress still cared about television appearances, but they weren't trapped inside a 24-hour reaction cycle. Now imagine serving in Congress today. Every statement is recorded and every vote becomes ammunition. Every compromise becomes suspicious and every disagreement becomes a headline. Every mistake becomes permanent. The politics no longer pauses. Campaign seasons never end. And maybe that changed the institutions more than people realize. Congress increasingly stopped acting like a legislature and started behaving like a battlefield with cameras. Debates became performances and hearings became production. Committee rooms become stages and the audience, America. Some of the politicians discovered something powerful. You do not always gain influence by solving problems. Sometimes you gain more attention by exposing problems. You do not always gain support by compromise either. Sometimes the conflict creates stronger loyalties, and once that incentive enters the system, everything begins changing. Because governing rewards the patience and performance rewards emotion. That difference matters because many of Americans remember the 1990s as imperfect but more stable. Budgets still created fights, parties still attacked each other, but there remain moments where politicians crossed party lines publicly without instantly becoming enemies to their own supporters, and that became harder. Today, many voters increasingly reward certainty over complexity, victory over negotiation, emotion over patience, and Congress adapted. Not because every politician became corrupt, but because the institutions evolved toward what gets rewarded. If outrage wins elections, you get outrage. If attention creates power, you get performance. If fear increases the fundraising, fear becomes valuable. And suddenly the citizens begin noticing something strange. The speech gets bigger, the promises get larger, and the headlines become louder. But daily life feels unchanged. Roads still need repairs, costs still rise, and people still feel ignored. Communities still struggle, and eventually the frustration becomes distrust. Then distrust becomes cynicism. Then cynicism becomes disengagement. And the people stop asking, what policy passed? And they start asking, what's the point? That may be one of the most dangerous moments for any republic because the governments depend on something invisible. Trust. Not blind trust, not unconditional trust, but enough trust for people to believe institutions still belong to them. When that disappears, the citizens stop expecting solutions. Every proposal becomes suspicious, and every election becomes existential. Every compromise looks corrupt, and every failure becomes proof that nothing works. And Congress, fairly or unfairly, has become the face of that frustration. But there is another possibility that deserves attention. What if Congress did not become dramatically worse? What if America simply sees more now? The internet exposed negotiations, cable news amplified conflict, and social media turned every disagreement into breaking news. Deals that once happened quietly become public. Arguments that once stayed in Washington entered living rooms. And maybe corruption increased. Maybe the visibility increased. Or maybe both happened together. That possibility changes the conversation because if Congress became what Americans dislike, it may also reflect broader cultural changes, shorter attention spans, faster outrage, constant political identity, demand for solutions, and endless information. Congress does not exist outside of society, it mirrors it, which creates an uncomfortable thought. If Congress feels broken, what if citizens are looking into reflection? What does not mean accept decline? What does that mean, accept decline, I should say? I'm sorry. It means rebuilding the trust requires more than replacing names. It means changing incentives and rewarding outcomes, valuing long-term thinking and expecting results instead of performance, and refusing to confuse political entertainment with governance. America has survived wars, economic collapses, political scandals, division, transformation, but the real question is not whether disagreement destroys a nation. The question is whether a system can survive when conflict becomes more profitable than solving problems. That may be the question Congress and America must answer in this generation. If the conversation challenged your perspective, even if you disagreed with parts of it, then the episode did its job. Because democracy doesn't survive when people stop asking difficult questions. It survives when people stay engaged. Drop your thoughts below. Do you think Congress actually changed, or did America simply become more aware of what was always there? And if you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. This has been the Unfiltered Political Lens. And until next time, question narratives, follow incentives, and stay informed. And never surrender your ability to think for yourself. And as always, we'll see you in the next one. Peace.